We are back in the Salem newsroom now, this time with Salem News reporter Caroline Enos. We were at the newsroom on Friday with Paul Layton and Dustin Luca, and you were missed, Caroline.
Oh, I miss being there.
Okay, but you were busy, on assignment, as they say. So much to talk about, and in our little pregame warm-up here, I just discovered that you have another reporter helping out now covering Danvers, so you're primarily in Peabody?
Yes. Yep. I have a break now, which is nice. Still plenty to write about, but I can kind of focus a little bit more there.
Okay, yeah, big, especially with Route 114 there. All right, I want to start with your most recent coverage in today's paper about North Shore tourism get together. There is obviously a big need for information among towns and cities with respect to tourism because living on Cape Ann, I know that it's just growing by leaps and bounds. So tell me a little bit about what happened on Friday.
Yeah. So again, thank you for having me on as always. On Friday, I went and covered a tourism convention at the Marriott Hotel in PUD, which really focused on, tourism as a whole in Massachusetts, but specifically on the North Shore, which, as you said, obviously is so thriving between Salem, Gloucester, all of Cape Ann, everywhere. So kind of one of the most interesting things that they discussed is how we have to kind of approach tourism, right? So obviously there's a lot of art colonies and a lot of artists and performers and cultural kind of aspects of the North Shore that really have been celebrated and are the draw of why people come here besides, the beautiful ocean and great food. So they had the executive director of the Mass Cultural Council, Michael Bobbitt there, who really kind of drove home this point of making sure that, hospitality businesses like restaurants, hotels, motels, venues, really working with local artists and kind of cultural organizations to mix the two together because you're not going to have people coming here if you don't have a drive, and the drive a lot of times is culture and the people who are behind that. So that was really interesting.
Hmm.
And we've also seen in the last kind of 8 years, mainly during the Baker administration, that there hasn't been a lot of push for funding tourism from the state specifically. Obviously, there's a lot of local organizations and uh, great chamber of commerce and kind of business organizations like that that kind of help drive funding locally. But this is really the first time in a while that we're seeing the governor's office kind of push this. And for the first time in 8 years, there's, specifically in the budget, there's room for tourism in the kind of, I shouldn't say budget because there's always tourism in the budget, but kind of in a plan to reevaluate the budget. There's really a concerted effort from Maura Healey to kind of up the spending and make it more of a priority, which is really encouraging for local organizations, here in Salem, Gloucester, as you said. So, and we're also seeing an increase in tourism. In 2019, I think it was like, I want to say $25 billion spent by tourists in Massachusetts. And then in 2022, after the pandemic, that increased by another 5 billion. So we're really, a top attraction. But then when you look nationally, Massachusetts is only the number 46 when it comes to the state actually funding tourism. So there's a lot of work to be done, but there's also great work being done. So that was really interesting to see come
Well,
together.
there's a great local connection there, obviously, because of Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll had Kate Fox as destination Salem director, and of course, Discover Gloucester has learned from that model. And in Gloucester, we have Tess McCulgan, who
Mhm.
is sort of following that model and increasing everything. So that there's a real local connection there. Did you get to talk to Kate Fox?
Yeah, actually, so she was kind of the star of this convention, of course, obviously, because there's a lot of the Salem organizations and businesses there. So every time she got on the stand, everyone was pretty much cheering her name, quite literally at one point. Yeah, so for people that don't know, she kind of was the Miss Salem Tourism. She ran Destination Salem, and now she's the executive director for the state's Office of Travel and Tourism. So I think it's great, obviously that you have someone who's been on the front lines of local tourism and possibly the busiest, I think, craziest part of local tourism on the North Shore. I mean, I know the beaches get a lot of stuff, but there's nothing quite like Halloween.
Yep.
So that was great to hear her talk and kind of her insight.
Well, that's interesting, and that's pretty cool because obviously it's an industry that is really growing as I don't know, as people get more have expendable income, I guess, and the climate changes, it gets warmer and warmer. So
Hmm.
all very interesting. Great coverage. Great story. Next up, we're going to talk trash.
Yes, yeah, that's been a topic I've been covering a lot actually. So, when I was doing Danvers, as a part of my full-time beat up until recently, there was a lot of talk there about, a new trash fee and making it an automatic or automated trash pickup service, and they, signed on with Republic Service, which kind of bought JRM hauling, which everyone on the North Shore pretty much used. So it was interesting to see the transition from that standpoint. But now in Peabody, there's some more kind of transitional stuff. So like I said, Republic Services bought JRM back in 2022, I believe, and with that they absorbed kind of JRM's contracts. So they didn't start new contracts with their clients; they just continued them out. And as you read in PBD, it's been a bumpy ride to say the least. It seems like every week there are neighborhoods that don't get their trash picked up on time. Sometimes there's, delays as many as 2 days. And obviously that's not great, especially in the summer when there's trash and it's blowing on the street and it smells and it's not great. So the city kind of, gave them an adjustment period where it's like, okay, they've just taken us over. We're going to kind of work out the kinks. But, it's January now. They took that over back in the summer officially, maybe in the spring. So it's not been great. But one of the big reasons for why it was kind of there were these huge delays or really making problems for residents was because the trash hauler trucks had to go to a facility in Haverhill to offload, which had long wait times. That facility sounded like it was kind of, had a lot of, I would say, traffic going into it. And once you got there, trucks would be there for 2 hours just sitting there sometimes. Which obviously, if they had to get back into another run in Peabody, that delayed that. So it was really just kind of a mess. But they recently, on January 20th, switched to working or to bringing trash to a site in Danvers. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that should help with the issues. But it's good that there was an effort to fix it. I think there's also frustration because the effort came now and not earlier. I know City Councilor Tom Rosignol, as if you read the story, he talked to me about this, but he was very frustrated because he had hoped that the company would have worked on this earlier since they knew it was an issue earlier. Back in December, he filed a or he suggested a resolution for a Republic Service representative to come to the City Council to talk about what the issues are. That passed unanimously. He still he said he told me he's playing email tag with the company trying to set up that date. But yeah, again, like it's good that there has been change, he said, but this should have happened earlier. And also it's frustrating for people because you don't think that trash is a huge deal until it's on your curb smelling.
Right,
So
right. Yeah. Well, I know at WESX when I was over there, the biggest reaction that we got from the public was when Marblehead dog walkers talked about scooping the dog poop, and it was just all hell broke loose. So I understand that. Um, as a reporter, Caroline, now something like this, do you have, I don't know, a schedule, a calendar or something where there's something coming up and you have to go check on that again with, let's say, with respect to this trash situation? An event, or is it just kind of random and you just have to sort of every day make calls?
it definitely depends on the story. I mean, when things are in committee and city council or being discussed, in a by the planning board, committees like that, it's pretty easy to track them because okay, at the next meeting, there's a good chance it'll be on the agenda. So check the agenda for that day. And then if it's on that agenda, great. I know on that date I'm gonna go and report on that. But then when it's stuff kind of anecdotally in the works, things that aren't necessarily right in front of officials' eyes, or at least I should say that aren't in front of what they're talking about at those meetings or aren't a part of that. It's kind of definitely a lot of looking on Facebook, seeing what people are saying, if it's still
Oh,
being
yeah.
talked about locally. Just kind of keeping an eye out on just yeah, I guess that's the biggest thing is to try to gauge residents' discussions. And social media has obviously made that really, really easy to do. Um, and then there's also just, I know it's a thing that's happening. And even if I don't hear about it, it's like, okay, well, it's been a while since I've heard about this. I should
Right.
ask someone if they've heard anything new.
But social media is a source.
Yes, yes, it's a huge
Interesting.
source.
Mhm.
And I know obviously we're kind of pushing away from Twitter, but even there, it's like even though we're not really posting to Twitter anymore, because it's become a cesspool, there's still great conversations going on there that aren't, toxic. They're still,
Mhm.
focused on local issues. And between that and Facebook, it's really helpful for me for sure, and every other
I,
reporter.
I got to tell you, I was watching a video last night on the greatest trash talker of all time, Larry Bird.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to put you in that category, but I appreciate your coverage on that. And now, finally, Caroline, a more serious note. There was a former Holocaust survivor named Sonia Whites from Peabody who did wonderful work over the years in schools. She visited schools all over the North Shore, recounting her experiences and so on. And I know a lot of former students and who now as adults reflect on that still to this day on her ability to discuss this. You had a more recent experience, or there was a more recent experience in Peabody that you wrote about.
Yes. So on the 27th, so this weekend was International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Um, and every year the Lapin Foundation, obviously, which they do a lot of programming around this, since Lapin Foundation is really about Holocaust education and also fostering a sense of Jewish community and identity, which is really important. Especially as you listen to these stories of Holocaust survivors that are, much more not as frequent now, since we're really at the end of that living history, since these people are in their 90s and even hundreds. So um, the survivor that I got to listen to is over Zoom. He was in Western Mass, that's where he lives now. So I didn't get to see him in person, but honestly, when you're listening to the story, it doesn't really matter when they're right in front of you.
Mhm.
His name is Warner Salinger. He is turning 92. His story is a little different because, usually when you think of the Holocaust survivor, you think of someone who escaped the camps or has survived the camps or, witnessed their entire family kind of die in the worst parts of the Holocaust. And with him, he was able to escape right after Kristallnacht, which is this, horrible night in 1938, November 1938, where the Nazis and even just regular German people who weren't soldiers or weren't really high up in the party went and raided and destroyed, Jewish stores, synagogues, homes. They even rounded up, that was one of the first mass roundups of Jewish residents where they sent them right to the camps. So he was 6 years old watching that happen from his apartment window. And obviously, when you're six, you don't really fully understand what's happening. But he said that even to this day, he could still smell that acrid smoke from coming from a synagogue down the street. So hearing that is just so powerful.
Mhm.
And thankfully, him and his parents were able to flee the country right after that, and came to America. And then once he got to America, he became friends with Albert Einstein, oddly enough.
Wow,
Uh,
wow.
so yeah, he went and stayed with relatives because sadly his mother died right after they got to America from tuberculosis, which is so sad to think that she escaped that just to come here and not get to live the life that she wanted. But his grandmother was friends with Albert Einstein's caretaker, and they lived down the street from him. So whenever she would go and visit her friends, she'd bring him and with her, and Albert Einstein would bring him through his gardens and play music for him on his violin because he loved children, and Warner was about 9 at the time. So it was it's so cool to see what he got to live through. And then also crazy enough, he went back to Germany as a member of the US Air Force in the 1950s during the Cold War, and he married the daughter of a Nazi soldier. So
Wow. Yeah,
it's
you
a
can't
lot
make
of
this up. Yep.
you cannot make this up. He was hesitant to tell her that he was Jewish and that he had fled with his family, back in 1938. But when he did, her and her family did not care. They were pretty progressive Germans. Her father had been drafted into the war, so he didn't want to fight, and he was able to get out because he got injured on the front lines while trying to press into the Soviet Union. So they weren't sympathizers. They were um, more so regular German people. And to hear that him say, "Oh, I love my father-in-law and he loves me," it's like that's so important to hear, especially now, since, as he discussed, there's just a rise in anti-Semitism, a rise in Holocaust denial, which is terrifying. It's like I said, because we're losing this living memory with the deaths of these survivors. So it's important for organizations like the Lebanon Foundation and, everyday people to really pass on these stories and these experiences.
I think it's important that you do stories like that, and being a very young person, your understanding of it is so, in my opinion, I'm an old guy now, and what I see happening worldwide, and especially to oppressed populations, I guess, and especially the Jews. It just, I always thought when I was your age, by the 21st century, we'd be living on the moon. We'd be all together as a global family. And it's important, I think. My dad, just one quick anecdote. My dad was in the army. We were in Germany in the 60s. And in 1960, I think I was in the sixth or seventh grade. He was on some kind of a winter duty, and they visited one, I think it was Dachau. And this was now 15 years after the end of the war. And he was away for a month. And when he came home, he was just shook to his core. And he was an Iwo Jima survivor. He was on Iwo Jima.
Wow.
But what he wouldn't tell us, he mentioned a couple of things that just, so many years after the war were still there. And to have people not understand that this was a real historical event is maddening in this country. And
Yep.
as an American educator, it just won't do. So thank you for what you did. Thank you for
Yeah.
covering that.
Yeah, I mean, it was so interesting. And actually, I actually visited Dachau when I went to Germany back in October. So for
Wow.
me, it was like seeing this history in action in a weird way, in a, different way. And I'll give a quick plug. There is a Holocaust museum coming to Boston right next to Suffolk University on Tremont Street. They're trying to get that up, I think, by 2025 or 20 in the next few years. So it'll be great to have something a little bit more localized because they do plan to focus on the survivors who came here and even the Nazis who lived here, because there are pictures of brownstones on Beacon Hill in the 1930s with swastika flags out front. So I'm glad to see that there's a real concerted effort to preserve this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you've done good in school, so I'm glad to hear that, and that you understand stuff at such a young and tender age. Caroline, anything else that you want to mention that maybe you're working on or following up on, or that grabs your interest?
See, the fun thing about working on a ton at once is as soon as you publish something, you kind of forget you wrote it.
Ah,
So I'm
yeah.
sure I can answer that question on in some way, but yeah,
Okay.
my best advice is just to look at the front page.
Okay.